students didn't look up until Professor Lupin was 2 feet away. Then he wriggled his curly-toed feet and broke into song. Loony loopy looping. Pius sang, Loony loopy looping, loony loopy looping. Rude and unmanaged as he always was, Pius usually showed some respect towards teachers. Everyone looked quickly at Professor Lupin to see how he would take this. To their surprise, he was still smiling. Harry Potter, a prisoner of Azkaban, shake hair rolling. Remus. It seemed like an age before the train finally arrived at Hogsmeade Station. Snape had spent the whole journey with his nose buried in DADA book, and Remus hadn't dared to interrupt him. He didn't want his new friend to talk to him like he talked to Potter. When they got off the train, it was dark and raining. Iron grey clouds cloaked the sky above Hogsmeade, blocking out of any view of stars or the moon. Remus, however, didn't need to be able to see the moon to know what stage it was in. It tugged at the very marrow of his bones as it waxed and waned, the same way it tugged on the sides of the sea. The first years huddled together in the rain, while older students all hurried towards carriages that waited for them outside the station. Remus nearly choked with fright when he saw some creatures that were pulling them, massive and black and skeletal, against the Scottish sky. They didn't really look like horses, but it was the closest description Remus could get to them. One of them shook its great bat-like wings, sending spray of water into air, and then turned its head to stare at Remus with sightless wide eyes. With yelp, he tried to back away, tripping over someone's foot and landing on someone else, bearing both of them to the ground. Raising himself up onto his elbows, Remus stared down into white-gray eyes, the exact color of the clouds above them. To his dismay, he recognized Sirius Black. That meant, "You again!" Someone yanked him off Black by back of his tatty robe, and Remus struggled to his feet as Potter held out a hand to help Black up. "What exactly is your problem?" Potter glared as Remus tried to wipe the mud of his robes and only succeeded in streaming it. I just... Remus began. "Leave it, I'm fine." Black glanced at Remus, then back to Potter. It wasn't a little bit. "No," Remus said, desperate to redeem himself. "It was those horrible horse things pulling the carriages. One look at me." "Horse things?" Black asked, turning to stare at the carriages, then back at Remus. "Yes, there's nothing there, mate." There is! Remus said desperately. "Can't you see them? They're skinny and black, and they have all wings and white eyes." Now Black, Potter, and the chubby mouse-haired boy were staring at him as though he was insane. "I told you he was mental," Potter hissed. "First years!" They were interrupted by the hugest man that Remus had ever seen. He towered over the crowd of sudden first years, looking down on them with beetling black eyes. His beard was wild and thick, and he wore the biggest, bulkiest coat Remus had ever seen. Remus didn't even dare to back away or look surprised. He was beginning to wonder if he really was insane. Perhaps that was another symptom of being the dark creature that his father hadn't bothered to inform him about. "Bloody hell!" Potter's voice was both out and unashamedly loud. "That bloke is massive!" Remus breathed a sigh of relief and joined the rest of first years in backing up a step. "Don't be scared," the giant man bellowed. "I'm Rubius Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds of Hogwarts. First years have to cross the lake to get to the school. In the boats! Come on! No more and fall into a boat." Remus looked around for Snape, hoping to share a boat with his new friend, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. He ran up and down the bank of the lake, searching each of the boats until he spotted Snape already sitting in a boat with 3 other students, staring out at them, Remus felt betrayed and resigned at the same time. After all, if even his father didn't like him, why would a stranger he had only just met want to spend time with him? Snape didn't even notice his gaze, seeming intent on staring out over the lake. Lost your new friend? Maybe even crazy kids have some taste. Remus sprang around and found himself face to face again with Potter Black and the shoppy boy sitting in a boat nearby. Potter was smirking and the other two looked amused. Remus was glad he was so used to controlling his strong emotions. He kept his face entirely blank as he turned to glance at Snape again. Come on, in you go. The boats are about to leave. Before Remus could react, he felt a pair of massive hands grasp him under the armpits and lift him in the boat beside the subway boy. Who said you could share a boat with us? Potter demanded. Remus couldn't bring himself to answer. He scrolled down in his seat and tried to avoid their eyes as the boats began to move, seemingly of their own accord. Remus stared out over the rain-spotted lake as the other three leaned together and talked in low voices so he couldn't hear. When Hogwarts Castle came into view, however, he caught his breath, his bad mood seeming to melt away. The castle and its grounds lay sprawled across the Scottish landscape, pointed trustly jutting towards the sky and the golden-lit windows twinkling against the silhouetted walls. It looked like a fairy tale castle, simmering and blurred around the edges because of the rain. Hogwarts disappeared briefly as the boats carried them through a tunnel that led a little underground harbor before it reappeared again in all its glory. Remus couldn't drag his eyes away from the castle as he clambered out of the boat, transfixed. The biggest thing he could ever remember seeing before was the forest backing onto their house. He had been to London and Diagon Alley, but he had seen that all in small sections, a shop at a time divided by a twisting street. The forest had been bigger, but the last time he had seen it, he'd been 6 years old and caught up in the moonshadow magic with his mother. He had sensed the space around him, but had never really laid eyes on it, as the trees had disappeared away in the blackness of night. Hogwarts was different. It gave an impression of grandeur and majesty, and mystery and looming and lots of other big, impressive words that Remus knew from books he had sneaked out of his father's study. The main doors alone were so huge that at least 4 Hagrids could have stood on one another's head and still not been able to talk to get through. Come on, first years! Hagrid shooed the huddle of students towards the great doors where a tall, black-haired witch, dressed in formal robes and wearing grim expression, waited for them. I'm Professor McGonagall, she said, expression stern. If you will follow me, it's time for the sorting. The first years trailed after her and into the great hall. Remus' robe was second-hand and too big for him, and being weighted down by rainwater seemed to make a droop even further to the floor. As they entered the great hall, he was entranced by sight of that he tripped over the hem and stuttered in the back of a girl with dripping red hair who swung around and grabbed his arm. Sorry, Remus muttered, mortified. Why wouldn't he act normal like others? Because you aren't normal, voice in his head pointed out. You are a monster. You not human. It's okay, she said kindly, peering him through vivid green eyes. Look at the ceiling. As she released his arm, he tilted his head back and Moss tumbled again. It was incredible. Storm clouds rolled fitfully above them, pouring with rain that disappeared before it was even halfway down the room. Candles floated like bright wax stars below the clouds, lighting the room with golden glow. Come along, first years, Professor McGonagall said, hurrying the gaping students along to the front of hall. On platform near the front stood three-legged stool with teddy hat placed on it. As the Perseus lined up nervous and tripping before it, Remus needed a look at the rest of the hall. There were 4 long tables crowded with students of varying ages. Above each of the table hung the banner of their house: Snake for Slytherin, Eagle for Ravenclaw, Badger for Hufflepuff, and Lion for Gryffindor. Remus felt himself begin to tremble with nervousness. He had never seen so many people in one place before. He remembered reading about Sorting Hat in Hogwarts history. Would he have to sit there in front of all these people and put it on? What if he fainted with fright? Butterwort Bernard! Professor McGonagall's voice suddenly echoed around the hall, and the first boy in line stumbled up to the stool and jammed the hat on his head. A slipping hat's brim opened, and the voice called out, "Ravenclaw!" The table of Ravenclaws cheered as the boy hurried to join them, blushing furiously. Parkinson, Adora, Slytherin, Smith, Jennifer, Hufflepuff. Remus felt his heart rate speed up as the line grew shorter. Potter, James. He watched with churning stomach as the boys sauntered up to the stool, appearing completely unafraid. He jammed the hat on his head, and almost as soon as it had touched his messy locks, the word Gryffindor echoed around the room. Black, Sirius. There was stir from the Slytherin table as Black headed towards the stool and put the hat on his head. There was long pause, and Black's eyes were screwed shut as if he were thinking very, very hard. Eventually, the hot steed announced, Gryffindor. There were gasps from all corners of the room, and for a moment, Black just sat on the stool as he thought he couldn't believe what he had heard. Remus glanced towards the Slytherin table, where many of its members were sending murderous glares towards the boy, and the Gryffindor table, where they all seemed too shocked even to cheer. Suddenly, a small, rather sudden figure with very messy hair rose at the Gryffindor table and climbed up to his bench. Woohoo! Go Sirius! Potter yelled, seeming completely self-assured and embarrassed. I knew you could do it, mate! As if this broke the spell, Black's face broke into a tremendous grin, and he sauntered over the Gryffindor table, which had erupted into cheers while many of its occupants sent rude gestures towards the Slytherins. Remus felt something in his heart twist. It had been way the Potter had stood up for his new friend and cheered, not caring what anyone else thought. Remus glanced towards Snape, who was standing few people in front of him. He was nearing in Potter's direction, having apparently forgotten all about Remus. Silence! Professor McGonagall called. The sooner the sorting is over, the sooner you can eat. The hall immediately grew quiet. Pettigrew, Peter. There was very long pause. Then Gryffindor. Black and Potter cheered loudly as chubby boy from the boat went to join them, beaming proudly. There was very few more before. Snape, Severus. The hat-pin barely touched the boy's greasy hair before it announced, Slytherin. Remus felt his heart sink. Where on earth was he going to be put? What if he wasn't put anywhere at all? What if he sat on the chair for hours and hours until brim opened and called, Werewolf? He felt his con mask begin uselessly. There was only a red-haired girl in front of him. Evans, Lily, Gryffindor. Lily smiled delighted as she skipped towards the Gryffindor table and took a seat. Lupin, Remus. His heart tried to hammer itself out of his ribcage as he tentatively approached the stool. He tripped over the edge of his hem again, staggering later as sneakers rose from the students. He sat down feeling utterly miserable and pulled the hat over his head. Well, well, the voice said in his head, a little wolf. That's very unusual. I'm sorry, Remus thought this, but please don't tell anyone. I'm here only to serve you, the voice said, something calm and unflustered. Now, where to put you? Hufflepuff, Remus begged silently. Hufflepuff? The Sorting Hat sounded amused. No, I don't think Hufflepuff suits at you at all. Nor does Slytherin. You don't have slyness needed to fit into the snake house. And the prejudices you will encounter there will not do at all. Ravenclaw, well, it's a possibility, but still not quite right. Let's see, you are brave. You are kind and loyal, but you haven't been given opportunity to see this yet. And plenty of courage. I can see that. It took plenty of courage for you to just come here. Yes, I think you will do well in Gryffindor. Not Gryffindor, Remus stopped his fawning, not with them. Trust me, the hat whispered. Then Gryffindor, it announced aloud, and Remus felt his heart plump and settle in his stomach, where it thumped and ached painfully. He pulled the hat off his head and stumbled towards the Gryffindor table, completely unaware of the applause from his new house. Sliding into the chair at the first year's end of the table, he saw Potter, Black, and Pettigrew staring at him in shock. It put you in Gryffindor? Black said incredulously. But you are loopy, Pettigrew agreed. Potter said nothing. He squealed at his empty plate, ignoring Remus. As at the last of students were sorted, Remus also stared down at the polished wood of the table. He was using every ounce of his acting skills to keep his face looking calm and neutral when all he wanted to do was cry.